Where not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people. Where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out.
Friday Java. On the 28th of September 2018. This will be our last program for the month of September as we roll towards October. Beaming from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, we move merrily along. The pivotal event of the last, we'll say, few months was the Senate Judiciary's hearing on the confirmation of one Brett Kavanaugh, a right-of-center justice that sits on the circuit court in the District of Columbia. Kavanaugh has been a party hack since the days of Bill Clinton. He was around with the Ken Starr investigation. He worked for Ken Starr, and he has been in and out of government service ever since. He was confirmed to the circuit court, and he has been on the circuit court. I should say, was appointed there by G.W. Bush, and he has been there since that time, roughly 11 years. Kavanaugh, a known conservative, has written on various conservative issues. He is a business-friendly justice, and that is one of the things, judge. That's one of the things to know. He's anti-worker, he's anti-women, and he's anti-people, anti-environment, you name it. He is on the wrong side of history. This is what the struggle was about. And then came a woman from out west, Christine Blasey Ford, a psychologist, a college professor, a researcher on all things trauma. A letter was written to her local congressional representative detailing her allegations from high school. She was in high school in the Washington, D.C. area, in suburban Maryland, around that area. Nonetheless, during those days, she attended parties that were or contained boys from private schools or parochial schools, whatever you want to call them. In the case of Kavanaugh, he was at a so-called private school. We'd call it parochial school. Doesn't really matter. An all-boys school. And she was a student at an all-girls school. Thus, they met at some party, and there was a pool there, and she had been in the pool. She went inside and had a beer. And then she was evidently, according to the story, taken upstairs, grabbed, and pushed into some bedroom. Kavanaugh was there, according to her outline of the event, and a guy named Judge. She was pushed into the room. Kavanaugh attempted to mount her. Judge stood there, and they laughed at her. She eventually was able to escape them. They were drunk. And there's other evidence to that effect as far as drunkenness is concerned in the yearbook. And Kavanaugh was a treasure of what we call the Beer Boys Brigade. And the goal was to drink 100 kegs of beer during the summer. He was on various teams, including the football team, the basketball team, etc. So there was camaraderie there. And as teenage boys would do, they drank beer. It's kind of interesting because in the 60s and 70s, early 70s, you would have had, this is basic tradition of so-called frat boys, that had beer, kegs of beer, and they sat at their respective houses and drank the beer. But these were high school kids. They would drink beer. Another favorite trick they had was the old 100% grain alcohol punch drink. Evidently, old Kavanaugh was good at that also, according to stories, that he spiked the punch. Since Dr. Ford has come forward, 3 other women at least have come forward in the news. So now we have a string of people that have come forward alleging various things that happened to drunken Kavanaugh. That was before the committee. The Republicans that control the Senate were wanting to rush this hearing through to get Kavanaugh on the court by the date that the Supreme Court meets in October. The committee will vote today, and then they will mark it up, or actually they will mark it up after they vote, and then they'll go through the debate process and what have you. And they want to get confirmation by Monday, I assume, as quickly as they say, is possible to get that confirmation done. But what the fight has done is, in a polarized nation, and a midterm that is coming up in November that's very controversial, a president whose polling numbers are dropping. We'll look at it. We'll also, in this broadcast, visit our friends at the University of Virginia, Charlottesville, the Crystal Ball, Larry Sabato's shop, and we always remember Heather Heyer, killed by white supremacists. And other right-wing gangs were all there in Charlottesville. Some of these right-wing gangs have also threatened Dr. Ford. She's forced out of her house and effectively into hiding. The family, some of them are with her, some of them are not. They're in undisclosed locations. And this is the price she paid as a citizen. And this is where it's very important. She stepped forward as a citizen. During the interrogation yesterday, a hired gun representing the Republicans, a woman out of Phoenix, Arizona, no doubt some of the leftover Goldwater types there. She was in the DA's office during the time of Joe Arpaio. And she represented people that had been victims of sexual abuse. But her act there was totally to discredit Dr. Ford, asking questions such as who paid your airfare to get to Washington, and then she went into various types of therapy. Dr. Ford went for individual therapy and couples therapy, and asked Dr. Ford, did she ever fear of flying? Because Dr. Ford had requested that the Senate investigators come see her in California rather than her coming to Washington, D.C. But she does fly, and she has flown to places like Australia, etc. So, but she couldn't catch Dr. Ford in that. What she was alluding to was a phobia. If she had a phobia, that's the old catch-all magic word for the hysterical woman. She could try to do that. But that did not work out for Mitchell, the gunfighter. She was not at the OK Corral. And on the Senate rules, she only had 5 minutes to set the particular chain of questioning up. That is an old trick used in depositions and before juries to discredit a witness. But this was not a jury. This was a partisan political brawl at the Judiciary Committee. 10 Democrats and 11 Republicans. The Republicans were all male. And that is why Mitchell, the gunfighter, the hired gun, was brought in. And the types of questions on funding, etc., and how she got to the polygraph examiner. She was at a grandmother's funeral in Delaware, very close to Maryland, the state that Joe Biden represented for so long. Incidentally, in the Clarence Thomas hearing in the early 90s, Joe Biden was chair of the Judiciary Committee. And Clarence Thomas was there for the electronic lynching, he called it. And Anita Hill was there as the victim. But now we have circled forward many years past 1991 and the Clarence Thomas hearings, almost roughly very close to 30 years. So it has been a very, very long time that the Thomas hearings were going on there. But there are some parallels, but not exactly parallels. The parallel is they were confirming a right-wing Supreme Court justice. Clarence Thomas was accused of sexual harassment, not of sexual assault. A very big difference there. In the two hearings, and also at the same time, there was only one Anita Hill. And Anita Hill's case had been investigated by the FBI. Kavanaugh's had not, because they were rushing along. There's several of these instances that should be investigated. Fox News had a field day of their people out there, but Mike Wallace didn't exactly go along with the line. He is at Fox News and does the Sunday show, the son of the other Mike Wallace, legendary, over at CBS. Was on 60 Minutes for many, many years, late, I should say, Mike Wallace. But the situation there, Wallace even said he had daughters that described things that happened in high school that they would not like to tell other people. He didn't go into details, and that is a positive situation there. And that her story, the Dr. Ford's, was believable. Not only was it believable, it was not good for the Republican Party. So the gamble here, as Fox called it, the game. We did a special program called The Big Game. What they did was they used the analogy of a football game. And according to the people at Fox, they were at halftime, and it was not looking as good for the Republicans. Now, the Republicans as a whole, the GOP, is a business party. Therefore, for the business interests, this is the reason this is happening, the business interests. Trump got in there, but the Trump endorsement didn't really matter. Trump had nowhere to go. He would have no doubt liked to have pulled Kavanaugh's name for a number of reasons. Kavanaugh was eating up the media cycle. DJ Trump did not like that. DJ Trump was making a fool out of himself at the UN, turned into a laughing stock. The General Assembly literally laughing at him when he said he was basically the best president and accomplished more than any other U.S. president. And laughter erupted there, and he even chaired a session of the Security Council. But that was all forgotten because of this hearing. Americans were tuned into it, watching the hearing, particularly Dr. Ford's part. I'm not sure how many watched Kavanaugh. We, on our own production, put the Dr. Ford about 18 minutes or so in its entirety in the program. We did not bother with the esteemed Judge Kavanaugh, because his views had been out there. He had been through the before the Judiciary Committee. They had already heard him, etc. And he had been in the news. His testimony was out there. And the way we looked at covering this event, that it was blown out of proportion. Because in the early stages, up until actually Dr. Ford came forward, he was to be just a shoo-in. There may have been some minimal Republicans that opposed him. They were looking to see what Colin of Maine would do. Would she vote for him and not vote for him? And Lisa Murkowski. Well, then after the revelations came Jeff Flake. So there are three possibilities out there, and they were trying to woo Senator Manchin of West Virginia and some other Democrats, Heidi Heitkamp, and also Donnelly of Indiana. Those Democrats in those very tight races were no doubt waiting to see what the Republicans did. If the Republicans had their votes, their 51 votes, those Democrats could go with the Republicans without any problem at all, because obviously we have enough votes. But as is today, we'll see later today how the committee votes. Jeff Flake is on the committee. I'm not sure if, I don't think Susan Collin is. She's not. But nonetheless, if just two Republicans hold out and say that they will not vote for him, he is done. He's like the proverbial turkey. You can turn him over, he's roasted. He's out of the game. They'll pick another conservative justice. And the problem there is that as far as conservative justices are concerned, they could literally form a line from Denver to Los Angeles. That's not a problem. But they're locked in with this clown because basically not only his business friendliness, but on top of that, his social values. His take on Roe v. Wade is not being a settled law. So in other words, this could change the court. But one of the things they have to remember is when you start talking about 4 or 5 years, 5 to 10 years in advance, who knows what the court will look like, because some of the justices there will have departed. And different administrations will be, as they say, in office. And what the Republicans fear right now is lame duck Trump, and what the losses will be from this particular election. So we leave it at that with Kavanaugh. We'll see what happens there with Kavanaugh. It's a 50-50 chance. But unfortunately, when you have to depend on people that are not that dependable, Republicans like Colin and Murkowski, now they did come through. Fortunately, because of John McCain, they defeated the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. That was a big victory for like-minded people that care about health care across these continental U.S. American states. Now, this would be a victory, but when you look at Dr. Ford's case, she's already won her case in the field of public opinion. And come the midterm election, we'll see how successful she was, whether or not this clown is on the court or not. After next week, if he's confirmed or not confirmed, it won't actually matter. He'll be there, or they'll get another one and put that person on the court. We'll go now to the Washington Post, and there's an article here. Won't spend very much time on it because we editorialized. It just said, behind the Kavanaugh fight, a national struggle over trust, identity, and sex roles. Well, the thing is here, as far as the roles of people, yes, you have the Me Too movement out there, but there would not have been a Me Too movement without the Women's March. It all started there, at least the national organizing effort. And since that time, more and more people have organized. We just finished the Bill Cosby trial, a totally different trial. That was a criminal trial. And Bill Cosby, the issue of Bill Cosby was in an election of a right-wing DA. He prosecuted and persecuted Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby is now in prison. He's 81 years old. And he did not get a fair trial. Now, the Judiciary Committee was a totally different situation. It was not a court, nor a civil, nor a criminal court. It was a political committee. And with him, and this is one of the problems the Republicans have, there could be a day in time, we don't know when, but additional women could come forward. And if that were to happen, and the Democrats were in a number of years have control of the House, Kavanaugh could be impeached. And then we'd see what the Senate looks like. So this thing just goes on and on and on and on. It does not stop here. As Kavanaugh said, he will no longer be teaching law courses. Well, he will not be teaching law courses. That tells you a little bit of what happens here. Yet even a traditional, this is just reading from the article here, reliance on the rule of law and the preposition of the innocent divides people these days. On the right, former Rick Sartorius, a right-winger from Pennsylvania, and the Democrats have weaponized the Me Too movement. There's a war going on here, and on the left, well, the Me Too movement is more than the left. A call to believe women unconditionally when they tell of sexual assaults has unleashed a steady flow of such accounts. Well, it's not unconditionally. Many of these women have struggled like Dr. Ford. And one thing also to remember with Anita Hill, different time period there, but Anita Hill was a Republican. And then you have the two of the women in the case of DJ Trump. Stormy Daniels, a Republican. McDougal, the Playboy model, said she's a Republican. So it's not; these are not left-wing women, period. So they are in this situation. So it's not across those types of party lines. It's more across of where they are. This has been one of the most shameful chapters in the history of the United States Senate. That's according to Ted Cruz. He blames the partisan warfare of Washington. Well, the partisan warfare of Washington is not really the partisan warfare of Washington. It's a showdown between various parts of capitalism. And you have the Koch brothers and various other billionaires that have opened up with Citizens United, and they are able to fund these right-wing candidates. Now, it goes all the way from state legislatures, state governments, where they've elected these Republican legislatures, and it goes into the federal level. So this is a different kind of situation, and you have voter suppression out there, and it's running a rapid. We've talked about voting suppression. Let's just do the polling numbers. We're a little late today with, and then we'll go to the people at the University of Virginia. This is Real Clear Politics. We've been looking at these numbers here, and they're interesting. Some of the races, that is. These are on Thursday. We looked at them once before. We have a Franklin Marshall poll. That would be Pennsylvania. And let me see, what is it? The Senate race there. Casey's ahead by 17 points in Pennsylvania. Michigan, the Senate race, Debbie Stabenow is up by 23 points in the state of Michigan. Then we have a California Senate race poll there. That's by the California polling people. Feinstein's ahead by 11 points there. That's a Senate race in California. Then we have the Delaware Senate race. Coppa is up by, 37? No, wait a minute here. 17. 37. Oh, okay. That's what I thought we saw. Okay, in Pennsylvania, that is Franklin poll there. Wolf is up by 22. The governor in Pennsylvania. In Michigan, the governor's race there, Whitmire is up by. Let me just adjust my monitor here a little bit. Is up by 8. Let me see here. 46 to 30. Wait a minute here. 46 to 37. That's 8-point advantage there. And we go on to California. Newsom is up by 12 over Cox. And let's see, next is next state up. This is the New York Times poll in New Jersey. We got Whitmire, we got Newsom. Yeah, the next one is New Jersey. Oh, this is a House seat. I'm not sure. Kim's up by 10. Nebraska, this is another one there. Beacon is up. And to Washington, another one. Wait a minute here. Washington, the 8th district there. Schooner is up by just 1. And another California district. That's Duncan Hunter is up by 15. That's a Republican district there. And then we go to another California district. Yeah, Nunez is up by 14. That was wondering about that district at one time, but evidently it hasn't, as they say, materialized there. That is California, 50, I think? Yeah. Wait a minute. Nunez. He is California 23. And finally here, the approval ratings at 47. And if we go to Wednesday, we'll just look at a few of these. These are NBC News polls. This is Brown is up by 13. That's in Ohio, Senate race in Ohio. And the governor's race in Ohio, it's tied, DeWine and Corey. In Florida, Quinnipiac poll, Andrew Gillum's up by 9 points, 54 to 46 over who's DeSantis. And we won't get into some of these other House district polls here, but let's see. Well, a few. Pennsylvania. Oh, this is the governor's race. Wolf is up. District 7. This is a House race. Anyway, nonetheless, it has the Wolf's up by 8 in that one. Then we have a KSTP, a Survey USA poll out of Minnesota. Craig is up by 3 there. And let's see, my thing just turned. Anyway, let's see, shifting around here. Some generic ballots, depending on whom you talk to. NPR, has the Democrats up by 7, YouGov by 8. Fox News, a generic ballot, has Democrats up by 10, and so forth and so on. Now, that was from Wednesday. I don't think we don't have any new polling for Friday here. Okay, so we can leave it at that. We'll now go to the University of Virginia. All right, hopefully we're to the University of Virginia now, and having some little technical difficulties here, but we'll be able to get rid of the technical difficulties if we're lucky. Nonetheless, this is on the 27th. This is Kyle Klondike writing here, the key takeaways here. This is, the subject here is the Senate and how 2018 sets up 2020. And let me just focus in here on this a little bit. The 2018 Senate races are very important, not just to determine the majority next January, but also setting up both parties for the next election. That will be the presidential election. Republicans are defending almost double the seats that Democrats are defending in 2020. Something of a reversal in this cycle, which the Democrats are playing a lot of defense. However, the most vulnerable 2020 seats is in Alabama, but the Democrats have some decent targets of their own. If the Republicans can net a seat or two this year, it would make their position much stronger in 2020, much like the strong showing in 2014 protected them in 2016. Likewise, Democrats holding the line this year would be a victory in itself. Now, let's look at the map here. Throughout the 2014 cycle, Republicans appeared favored to win control of the Senate, but there was some doubt about whether they would maximize their gains. They needed 6 net seats to take control, but given the map, it seemed possible they could win with 9 or 10. In the end, their eventual gains came out on the high end, as the Republicans won narrow victories in Alaska, Colorado, one they should have not won, and in North Carolina by 2 percentage points apiece. That is about as close as it gets, give or take. Along with 6 others by significantly larger margins, appeared to score a 9-seat gain from 45 to 54, and the majority. In an assessment published right after the election, we argue that the GOP's 9-seat gain in 2014 provided the buffer the GOP needed to be better able to preserve its Senate majority in 2016. Sure enough, the Republicans fell short in 3 close wins in 2014. They would have won the Senate in 2014, but lost in 2016. When the Democrats netted 2 Senate seats, it was the Republicans at 52 to 48. Majority in 2016. Since then, it had been reduced to 51 to 49. So that is as close as it does get. We bring this up to note that when assessing the Senate, keep an eye on the future. No doubt about that. Most people do. There's an imbalance in 3 Senate classes right now. As we noted many times, the cycle Democrats are disadvantaged this year by the fact that they are holding 26 of 35 seats being contested. Now, the Democrats need to win 28 or 35 seats, 80% of the Senate. Given that, they are defending several in the red states. And this has been talked about, and in truth, just holding the line at 52-49 would be a victory. And they list some of the states here. We won't go to those, but races this year in the Democrat races shaded by a current party control. And there are a lot of red states here, most of them smaller states. One big factor on the next cycle map is lack of crossover seats, meaning states that voted differently for the Senate in 2014 and the presidential in 2016. There are only 15 senators of 100 that represent states that voted for the other party of the president in 2016. 11 of them are on the ballot this year. Excuse me. The crossover senators, Doug Jones, he's in Alabama, Gary Peters in Michigan, Democrats in Trump-won states, and senators Cory Gardner in Colorado, Susan Collins in Maine. That's the state that Hillary Clinton won, but she just won re-election. We won't get into Doug Jones in Alabama. That's a wide open case. The most vulnerable senator on the ballot in 2020. Cory Gardner, yes, in Colorado. Remember, he's over Mark Udall out there in 2014. Seems a long way back. In Arizona, that's where Doug Ducey appointed a replacement for late John McCain. But Kyle doesn't plan to run in 2020. He may not even be around that long. Senate race there, that's Jeff Flake, Christine Simmer in there, and this is Martha McSally. That race is very close. Rated a toss-up by some. Current Democrat seats up in 2020. Gary Peters, Jean Sheehan, she's in New Hampshire. But that's going to open up. There's going to be lots of different territory out there. And Tina Smith would be on the ballot in 2020 if she can get elected to fill out the last there. So, and let's get down here to some of the toss-up seats. They see here, right here in Alabama, Arizona, and Colorado. Potentially competitive seats in Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Virginia. I'd caution a little bit on that. I don't think they're going to be as competitive in Virginia and Michigan or Minnesota. Republican seats in Georgia, in Iowa, Maine. I thought Susan Collins was reelected. Okay. Kentucky and North Carolina. No doubt about it, North Carolina has been there. Probably not competitive, at least at the start. Democratic seats in Illinois, Massachusetts, no. New Mexico, New Jersey, Oregon, and Rhode Island. Republican seats in Alaska, Arkansas, Idaho, Kansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Montana, Nebraska, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, and Wyoming. In West Virginia, well, that will change there. If the former senator, this is out in Montana, Bullock challenged Daines there. So the conclusion of this, we'll get to it. Overall, the 2020 picture looks like this. A bit more explosive for the Republicans, exposure, for the Republicans and Democrats, but the Democrats hold most vulnerable seats on the ballot. That is in Alabama. But again, things do change. And we already talked about this frost belt here. Down in Indiana is ahead by 3 points. In Michigan, Stabeno's way ahead. The governor's race there, Whitmire is ahead. Sherrod Brown in Ohio is up by 11. DeWine and Cadre, they are tied, or 1 point difference there. Cadre started out in a hole, as one would say. Casey in Pennsylvania is way up there over Bartlett. In Pennsylvania, that's Tom Wolf there. He is up over Wagner, 55-38, and Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin. She's moving ahead there over Volkmeyer. And in the governor's race in Wisconsin, Tommy Evans evidently has finally moved up in at least one poll. He's at 50-43. And President DJ Trump's ratings in some of these states. In Indiana, he's at 48. That's by the way he's nationally. In Michigan, he's only at 39 and 46 in Ohio, 45 in Ohio, 44 in Pennsylvania, 42 in worse shape in Wisconsin. So these are some of these states we'll be keeping an eye on. An open seat, that's Arizona 8. Wait a minute here. Arizona 9. So it's safe Democrat. Mike Kaufman leans Democrat. That's Colorado 6. Ross in Florida 15 leans Republican there. And Paulson leans Democrat. That is Minnesota 3. And Holdings, that is in North Carolina 2, leans Republican. There's an open seat in New Mexico. Pence, a toss-up there. Chris Collin in upstate New York leans Republican, was likely Republican. And the gubernatorial races here leans Democrat. That's in Colorado. Hickenlooper, it's open. He's not running. And Gateway Snyder leans Democrat. That's in the state of Michigan. That does it on that. Let's do the baseball scores. Now that we got things back together again. These would be the baseball scores. We're in the last week of Major League Baseball, of all things. Let me see here. Here we go. Oh, we just keep the glasses on. Nonetheless, these are from Thursday night. The Yankees were in Florida. Yankees at 12-1 over the Rays. The Phillies were in Denver. Rockies are 5-3. The Phillies been fading in a hurry. The Atlanta was in New York. Mets 4-1. In 10, Cleveland was in Kansas City. Royals 2-1 in that contest. The Pirates were in Wrigley Field and was shut out by the Cubs 3-0. This game we tuned into. The Tigers were in the Twin Cities. Twins are 9-3 in that contest. The Rangers were in Seattle and shut out Seattle. That's unfortunate. And I guess rain did in the Astros and Orioles. We'll see if we can get the standing here. Let's see. Yeah, we actually got it. In the American League East, Boston has clinched. The Yankees, I believe, they got a Y. Let's see what a Y is. Maybe they've got a wild card or close to it. In the American League Central, Cleveland has clinched. And that's it. In the West, Houston and Oakland. Oakland has a Y. I'll tell you what a Y is when I get down there. In the National League East, it's Atlanta. And in the Central, the Cubbies and the Brewers of Milwaukee. The Brewers of these, okay. Brewers just one game back. Well, all right. And in the West, that's still open. The Rockies. The Dodgers are one game back, and the D-backs are out of the game. And a Z is that they have clinched a playoff berth. A Y is they have clinched a wild card. Okay, so we go back up here. Who's a Y? The Yankees will do a wild card. The Athletics will do a wild card, at least one of the wild cards. And the Brewers and Milwaukee, they're in the final runnings, as they say, of it. They have actually clinched a division or a berth. We'll find that out at the end of the week. So this is Friday Jobber on the 28th of September 2018. We'll see you on the week that was on the political side. And on a numbers man, we'll be here with, we had a Fed meeting this week. The interest rates went up 0.25 or 25 basis points. We'll talk about that and what the Fed is doing, where the economy is. And we have an open source report. That the subject of it will be Linus Torvalds, the creator and maintainer of the Linux kernel. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow morning.